Assalamu alaikum, welcome back. Just before this break, we were talking about consistency and how to keep our lifestyle consistent in order to gain close to God. Sayyid mentioned a few examples, for example, having targets, setting yourself with realistic targets, and by doing that we can ensure to reach these targets and keep a consistent eye on, inshallah, getting closer to God. A key example for when we try to be consistent is when we pray our namaz. Often we find our prayer and our mind in two different places. We sometimes, when we're on the prayer mat, we think of such wonderful things. Sadly, it's not what we should be connecting with, and that is Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How can we make our prayers more powerful and consistent? And I think this is one of the most important things in gaining taqwa, closeness to God. If you can share some light on this, Sayyid.
I think that in terms of our prayer, one of the big mistakes that we make is that we don't see it as a way of connecting with God. Okay, there's a famous hadith from the Ma'soom, I believe it's from Imam alayhi salatu wasalam, it's attributed to Imam alayhi salam, that he says that when I want to talk to God, then I pray, and when I want God to talk to me, I read the Holy Quran. Okay, so when I want to talk to someone who has control over my life, right? So for example, my boss, I will practice like 10 times before I'll speak what I want to say, and I'll make sure that I'm presentable in such a way, and so on and so forth. But here is the one who has control over everything, that if he wanted, I would not breathe again, and that's it, it's all over. And when I stand in his presence, I don't consider all of these things, right? Now we have from the fiqhi point of view, these are the bare minimums of what you have to do and how you have to be in terms of in prayer.
Even within prayer, there's certain acts you can do to gain a better spirituality.
Right. So for example, we have an ayat in the Holy Quran that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that, O son of Adam, when you go towards prayer, when place of prayer, place of center, beautify yourself. Okay, so in the tafsir of that verse, it shows that the main mustahabat are that a person puts on good clothes, put on perfume, cologne, brush their teeth. That's why it's recommended part of wudu to brush your teeth as well, and do mouthwash. Make sure that person is presentable. And you notice the difference. When you do that, you'll notice a difference in the quality of your prayer. Why? Because you made an effort to show that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is something or is someone who is important in your life. Okay, that is one important aspect. Then, for example, one of the other mistakes that we make is that we rush into the prayer and then we rush out of it, right? Because the mind is that I need to get back to doing X, Y, Z thing. Okay. Whereas, if, for example, you just take a moment, it doesn't need to be long, but you just take a moment. So you've done your wudu, okay, and you come and stand on your prayer mat, and you just take a moment, a few moments. Okay, it doesn't even have to, maybe 30 seconds. Okay, and you just, for those 30 seconds, just pause and think that, what am I going to do? What is it that I'm about to do? Rather than, most of us, we do our prayers on autopilot. Okay, Why? Because we already know how to pray.
Yeah.
We know off by heart. We've been doing it since we
I
were
was just
4
going to
years
say,
old.
the thing is with prayer, it becomes repetitive.
Right.
And when things become repetitive, you tend to do the same thing over and over again. And correct me if I'm wrong, but things which we can do to change that is recite different verses, not always the same verses.
Absolutely. For example, one of the things that I was just coming to that. So like I said, for one thing is that just before you start, 30 seconds, take a moment to think that what am I about to do? Like I said, we're going in front of God. Okay. Then it's recommended, even when you're praying by yourself, it's recommended do adhan, do iqamah. Why? Not only because of all the rewards that are associated with it. For example, if a person does praying by themselves, the adhan and iqamah, 2 rows of angels are praying behind him. But also it gives us some time to reflect, right? When you're saying these sentences of adhan and iqamah, you're reflecting, what am I saying? I'm bearing witness that there's no God but Allah, Muhammad is the messenger, Ali is the imam, come towards prayer, come towards success, come towards the best action. All of these things, I'm reflecting over these things. And then I'm going to start the prayer. So this is what I'm coming towards. I'm coming towards prayer, success, the best deed. Okay? Now, so this is one. Then, for example, when you do the prayer, like you said, change it up a little bit. Okay? When you learn the prayer when you were 4 years old, at that time you only knew Qul Huwallahu Ahad. So you used to recite Qul Huwallahu Ahad, which is fine. And Qul Huwallahu Ahad is a very important surah. But you don't need to recite Qul Huwallahu Ahad in every surah, in every rakat, in every prayer. Okay? Mix it up. Read some different surahs. Other surahs as well. Read some different surahs. Okay? That's important as well. Why? Because like I said, it makes it less monotonous. 1. 2, when you're when you're in a rush, it's a different story. But there's times, obviously weekend, not so much of a rush. Other times, we're relaxed. Try and take your time when doing the prayer. Okay? When one is doing it by themselves, take your time doing the prayer and reflecting on the prayer. Another thing is if you join in jama'at to do the prayer. There's lots of benefits of jama'at and lots of rewards, but at least in terms of the God consciousness part, the least benefit is that when you go for jama'at and you listen to the surahs which is why we're commanded that when you're in jama'at, the imam reads the surahs and everybody stays quiet and just listen. You listen to the surahs that are being recited, okay, and that will give you, I promise you that if that person has proper pronunciation, alhamdulillah, then it will give you more spiritual elevation just by listening to the Holy Quran. Why? We reveal the Quran as a cure and a mercy for the believers. Okay? So even just listening to the Holy Quran in the prayer, that will give your prayer spiritual elevation. So that's very important. That's another aspect and factor that's important to reflect over. And these little things, when they come together, will hopefully make the prayer a better prayer and a more God conscious.
Inshallah. I think we should also see the beauty of praying. There's many reasons why we pray, but the most important one is when we have such a busy lifestyle, and when you can, like we mentioned, technology and all these different factors. What praying 5 times a day means is that you're remembering God constantly throughout the day, and what that's doing is essentially our topic, being God conscious. And I think that's very important that we see the beauty of namaz rather than something which we get forced to do because the time is almost running out.
Right.
Okay. Moving on. What can we do to instill in our kids from a young age of this idea of God consciousness? Now, this question, before you answer it, what we should be looking at here is how we should be bringing up our kids to realize that God is great. what we tend to do sometimes, we may not realize, is that say you're going to be punished because you don't do certain things. You're going to, God is not going to see you as a good person if you do this, if you shout at your mum, for example. Anyways, we portray ourselves as if God is this being that's going to tell us off in the hereafter, and we just put connotations on the punishments that He may give us in the hereafter. However, we should be looking at God in a different perspective, which you can hopefully mention. Like, for example, when a kid is in a car and they're all going on a family trip, for example, you as a father or as a mother should tell your kid, look at the beautiful sun today. It's such a beautiful... All these little factors that can basically bring kids closer to God through their love for something which they want to reach, rather than something they want to stay away from.
I think a very important point, a very important factor, which is that, like I said, we have to have that balance between the hope and the fear. Okay, sometimes we go too far on the fear scale, especially when telling the kids, oh, if you do this, this is going to happen to you, or if you do this, this is going to happen to you. No, if somebody does something good, then say, well done, you did something good, and that's, God's going to reward you for this. Okay, rather than focusing on the negatives. Like you said, that gives the impression that God is just there waiting for us to give punishment. And a lot of people who have gone off the faith have this big criticism of religion and of Islam, that why is it that there's this all-powerful God who is just concerned with punishing me? Okay, and that is something that we need to reflect on our attitude. That is not what God is, but that's the attitude or the perception that we've given of God. So that's something important to reflect over. One. Number two is the fact that yes, the punishment is there, there's no doubt, but the mercy of God is much greater than that, and this is what we should focus on. Without, like I said, we have to maintain the balance, without saying that because there's mercy, that means I can do whatever I want. No, there's mercy, but even the mercy is only for the chosen ones. It's not for everyone. Okay, that means that I have to make myself worthy to receive that mercy of God. Okay, so I have to be hopeful, but at the same time I have to make myself worthy. And all of this is summarized in the fact that anything that I'm going to do, whether it's good or bad, the benefit and harm is going to come directly to me. There's no benefit or harm to anybody else, nor is there any benefit or harm that's coming to God as a result of so being God conscious ultimately is being self-conscious. This is why Imam Hussain alayhi salam famously in Dua Arafah says, "Man arafa nafsa faqad arafa rabb." Whoever recognizes themselves has recognized their Lord. Why? Because God consciousness in its actuality, Imam Hussain alayhi salam is telling us, is to be conscious of yourself. Why? Because that God consciousness is going to benefit me, it's going to take me and protect me from harm. Okay, that is the most important thing. And if we reflect on that, then we would have a whole totally new perspective. Like even when we're doing prayers, we think, oh, I'm doing a favor on someone by praying. No, you're not doing favors on anybody other than your own self. This is your own benefit. If somebody told you that you're going to have 6 figures in your bank account by the end of the day, but this is what you have to do, you do whatever you need to do to make that. Why? Because there's benefit in it. And if I knew the benefit in prayer and in jama'at, for example, there's a narration that says that if people knew the prayer, the reward of praying in jama'at, they wouldn't pray other than in jama'at. Why? Because the reward is so great and so much that it can't be achieved with anything else other than with praying in jama'at. right? Not only the benefits that come with it, obviously you'll meet your fellow believers, so on and so forth, it creates a bond, but the reward that's of praying together is so great.
I think the next topic or a point to make is mind over heart. Sometimes we use our hearts to think rather than our minds, and that's what can deviate us from not being God conscious. By listening to our hearts, we do what we feel that we think is correct rather than thinking of what is actually correct. Like we mentioned before, our minds are constantly busy playing PlayStation, listening to media, being with our phones. Now, even though these things may not be acts which are haram, they can still cause a deviation. And therefore, it's really, really important that we use our mind rather than using our heart. I think knowledge also comes into this. And I think recitation of the Quran also comes to this. But if you can mention anything which can help the youth out there to focus and to make sure that they're actually using their mind rather than the heart.
Right. So now in terms of using our mind and in terms of what you said, like we have all these distractions. So the biggest, if you like, disadvantage of all these media things that we have now is that our attention spans have reduced dramatically. Okay, so because we're used to hearing a clip which is like 3 minutes long, or watching a video which is 30 seconds or 1 minute, that's the extent of our attention span, right? If someone sends me like an 8-minute video, I'm not going to watch this, it's too long, right? Okay, even though 8 minutes is not that long. But why? It's because attention span's been reduced. I want instant, 30 seconds, 1 minute, 2 minutes, that's it. Okay, explain to me. I often get people saying, explain to me religion in 5 minutes. So it's not possible, right? You have to understand. You have to take time to study, to reflect, right? You can't have 3 points or 5 points and think that you've understood everything that you need to understand. No, it takes time. Okay, you need to explain, you need to understand. So this is, and obviously the health issues that are associated, like we get strain injuries from looking at our phones. We get neck injuries. All of these things that happen excessively looking at your phone, or excessively watching TV, or excessively doing all of these things, right? So that is certainly something from that point of view that we need to reflect on. Control your screen time. I have a friend who's very conscious of this, and he's very good. And he, for example, for his kids, says that I have limited their screen time to 1 or 2 hours a day. Okay, and then the rest of the day they have to do other things. Okay, obviously they're little and they're growing up, but it's a good habit to create at that stage of their lives, rather than if they grow up with watching screens 24 hours a day, which will negatively affect them. Okay, and if they know that they have to limit the screen time, then they would not get so engrossed in the screen time. That's very important. Then, as we said, how that affects our prayer and how it affects our concentration. This is the issue. So like I'm saying, if you got the time, when you got the time, it's very important to so let's say, for example, the prayer is at 7 o'clock, for example. Okay, so it's a weekend, I'm not at work. So let me take 15 minutes before the prayer time to make sure I'm ready, prepared. Okay, at 6:45 I'm ready to pray. Okay, and I come and I sit down and I just reflect, okay, for a few minutes. Just before I start my prayer, I come, sit down. Now, it's very important in terms of the place where I'm praying as well. If it's possible, it's better to pray in a place where there's no distractions, there's no TV, there's no, phones, this, that. Focus, it's quiet. it's warm, it's not too warm, you know, nice ambience, nice perfume, nice smell going on. All of these things make a big effect on the mood that you create before you start the prayer. And if you do these things, you'll notice there's a big difference in your prayer. Why? Because you're making it a place where you'd like to go. You're making it into a place where you'd like to be. Okay, where you feel comfortable.
I think in every house there should be, if there's
enough room,
have a room just for the purpose of prayer. During our final year exams, we had a 4-bedroom house. There was only 3 of us, and the 4th bedroom we just took everything out. It just made that a place of our worship to God.
Absolutely, and as you probably like you've done, you will know that makes a big difference.
Absolutely.
Why? Because you're going to a specific place to pray. And that place is set up in order to pray, and you don't do anything else in that place other than pray. And maybe a tip, for example, for those of us who have this habit of keeping looking at our phones, maybe leave your phone downstairs or leave it in a different room when you're going to pray. Put it on silent, you know, so you don't get distracted or focused towards the phone. Just make sure that those 10 minutes that you're praying, okay, are solely focused on the prayer and not on the phone.
I think by creating this environment and this practical element, what it does, it makes us from Fajr to Zohar just think about going back to namaz.
Yes.
And from Zohar to Asr, from Asr to Maghrib. And by having that thought in your mind of going back into that environment and being close to your God, it gives you the spirituality that you need in order to get close to Him.
That's right.
Okay, now I find that every time I go ziyarat, I get this spiritual upliftment. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, is the hadith which says try to go every year if you can to see your imam.
Yeah.
Ziyarat is an important aspect to get closer to God. If you can share some light on this, please.
I think ziyarat is very important because ziyarat means to visit. Okay, in Arabic, ziyarah means to visit. It's a very important spiritual upliftment. It's a spiritual journey. It's a spiritual trip. And the hadith, yes, from Kamil al-Ziyarat from Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, is that the rich should go to Ziyarat of Imam Hussain alayhi salam every year, and the poor should go every 3 years. Okay, so there's an emphasis that no matter who you are, and you know, whatever your financial situation and state is, you have to try to go for ziyarat. Of course, it is
benefits.
There's the financial aspect, but from my own personal experience, every time I've been for ziyarat, whatever I've spent in order to go there, as soon as I come back, within 1 or 2 months, everything that I spent, I would get it back, and more. So if somebody is thinking that, oh, I can't go to ziyarat because I am poor, I can't afford it, take this from me and from a number of people who have been ziyarat with me and have shared their own stories. Okay, and that is that, for example, if you think it's hard, I'll tell you the first time that I went for ziyarat. I just freshly graduated from my master's. I was probably like in about £16,000 of debt, and what I used to do is every day, whatever money that I would, £1 or £2 or £3 that would be left over, like change, I would put it in a bowl, and I would say that one day, inshallah, it's gonna fill up and it's gonna be enough to go for ziyarat. So don't underestimate this. Save up, go for ziyarat, and inshallah, Imam will repay you straight away. No, there's no question about this. Okay.
Inshallah.
What that does to you as a person, okay, is that you connect with Imam Hussain alayhi salam. Okay, you connect with the Imams. When you connect with the Imams, yes, you can connect with the Imams at home, no doubt. But there's a special significance of certain places, right? Like we said, there's certain times which are spiritual, certain months of the year, month of Ramadan, month of Muharram, so on. There are certain places. Okay, how significant is this? It's so significant that we have a narration from our 10th Imam ﷺ, who says to one of his companions that go to Karbala and pray for me. So this companion says, but it's a long story, making it short. The companion says to Imam ﷺ that, but you're the Imam, so why do you need? So he says, no, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Prophet says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made certain places where He likes to be supplicated to. And one of those places is the ha'ir of Imam Hussain in Karbala. Right? So certain places are very important in terms of supplication, in terms of prayer. So that's very important, and that's very important to reflect on. Maybe inshallah in a future program we can look at ziyarat in detail, but it's something very important, very significant. I want to emphasize this point that please save up,
go to ziyarah,
take a loan, go to ziyarah, and inshallah ta'ala your financial difficulties would be resolved, and Imam alayhi salam would pay you back for sure and for definite, inshallah, and it would help you to become more spiritual and more God conscious at the same time as well.
I think inshallah. Now before we conclude, we have discussed important topics which are going to help us gain benefits in this life and the hereafter. Our ultimate purpose is, at the end of the day, to get closer to God, whether that be to ziyarah, whether that to be bringing up our kids in the hope that they love God rather than the idea of just being punished by Him. What's so good about this show is that every topic that we've discussed goes all hand in hand. For example, we've discussed role model and how we can be a good role model and what that does, brings taqwa if the correct role model is there. What we've also discussed is this idea of disengagement of youth going to mosques. I think another topic which we could have mentioned today is by going to mosque brings us closer to God. And so inshallah, another topic, another week. Please join us Friday 7 p.m. and we look to hearing from you soon. As Khuda Hafiz.